Welcome to this fireside chat with Maarten Westelaar, the CEO of CEPSA. Today we'll explore the world of green molecules, mostly hydrogen, but I'm sure we'll touch on others, and what role they will really play in the energy landscape as we move forward. As you may know, CEPSA is a real flagship investment for Mubadala. It's a large asset today, but we are backing it to become even larger, and we really think there is a significant opportunity in the energy transition, which CEPSA will be able to capture. So with that, Maarten, I think it would be good if we could start by framing the energy mix, if you like, in terms of electrons and molecules and where certain solutions are needed. And I think it would be good to hear your thoughts on that macro point, and then maybe we'll move into CEPSA's strategy to address it after that.
No, thanks Rob, and very good morning to you and to all here, and thanks a lot to Mubadala for not just sponsoring this chat, but also for having us as a guest at their pavilion, which is clearly the best one in town. I was also pleased to know that it wasn't actually literally a fireside chat, because it's already quite warm.
That's right.
And so the air-conditioned side chat is a better idea. So if you look at the role of hydrogen is we can spend a lot of time on, but fundamentally the energy system. The energy demand, you can break up in demand for electricity and demand for molecules. And today the global division is about 20-80. So 20% of all energy is consumed in the form of electrons and the rest in the form of molecules. The easiest and quickest way to decarbonizing energy usage is through electricity. Because solar, wind, nuclear, batteries, there are solutions for electricity to be 100% decarbonized. Today technology can be done. So in a way the energy transition, the first and most obvious thing in the energy transition to do is to electrify as much energy usage as we can. So to drive that 20% electricity to the highest number possible, because that's easy to decarbonize. And now it will depend a bit on which think tank you ask, but somewhere between 50-55% of global energy demand can be electrified responsibly with today's technology. That leaves about 45-50% of energy demand that fundamentally needs a molecule. Because of energy density reasons, if you fly a plane, you need to bring a lot of energy, you don't have a lot of space. It can be because of energy intensity reasons. If you want to make steel, you need 1200 degrees Celsius, and with electricity you can only achieve 800. Or it can be for fundamental reasons. If you're the chemicals industry, you need a molecule to start with, because that's a molecule business in itself. So there are various reasons why energy demand, whether certain sources of energy demand need a molecule, can't electrify, and unfortunately in a way they are quite energy intensive. So the energy that most people use in this room today can be electrified. Your car, your home heating or your home cooling, but basically we will all as individual consumers only use electricity going forward in the future. But shipping, aviation, heavy goods transport on the road, heavy industry are all very, very big energy users. Not that visible in our day-to-day life, but big energy users. They need a molecule. Now today these molecules are oil, gas and coal, essentially. And to decarbonize these molecules, there is definitely carbon capture and storage, and that will play a role in tomorrow and in 50 years' time. And then you can continue to use, let's say, natural gas, put carbon capture and storage on it and get it very close to zero. But fundamentally zero molecules, there's only two alternatives, or three in a way. One is biofuels. And biofuels is not totally zero, but it gets very, very close if you do it well. And the advantage of biofuels is that it is liquid at room temperature, and it's drop-in. You can use it in a truck, you can use it in a plane, you can use it in a boat. on current engines. So biofuels is quite an attractive alternative. However, biofuels, as we know it today, is mostly made of food, of corn or sugarcane, and that means it's not scalable. Because if you scale biofuels first generation, that's called 100 times, then there's no sugar, no corn to eat anymore. So you can't. That's not a really scalable alternative. So the real future of biofuels is in waste-based biofuels, what they call second generation biofuels. But the problem with that is there's only so much waste in the world. And if you model that, you get to about, you can cover 10% of global energy demand by 2050 with second generation biofuels. And that's good, but it's only 10%. And we were talking about 45 to 50%. So you need other alternatives. And then really you get into hydrogen. Because hydrogen is a very, very versatile molecule. You can use it for almost any energy application. You can bring a ship from A to B, particularly if you turn the hydrogen into ammonia or to methanol. You can fly a plane on it. You can make steel, any industrial application. You can use it for chemicals. You can even use it to store power, so it can also play a role on the electricity side of the system. So it's very versatile. It's the most common molecule in the universe. And so there's a lot of hydrogen. You just need to get it into a concentrated form. So it's our belief that the hydrogen economy, hydrogen will have a very large market share in that molecule side of the energy sector, about 45 to 50% of the energy mix. Today, hydrogen is less than 1. So the scale-up we need in hydrogen to become 5, 10, 15, 20% of the global energy mix is an enormous industrial challenge that we all face, but we believe the opportunity is almost endless given from where we are today, and the world really needs to get on with it in order to displace the carbon carrying solutions and go after climate change.
Great. So I think with electrification will take us only so far. As you said, the molecules are still needed for the sort of 45% of energy demand there. So with that, can you now talk us through how CEPSA plans to address that and what choices it's made about addressing this energy demand?
Yes, broadly the choices we're making is to focus very much on that molecular space. And why is that? It's because we believe it's more complex. The electricity side of things, solar, wind, is quite straightforward, and therefore it's quite commoditized. The returns in that business are very, very compressed, because you and I can start a business tomorrow and build a solar farm without too much trouble. But you and I can't start a business tomorrow and build a hydrogen value chain, because it's complicated. It's technically, technologically, and physically a complicated business. So in Spain, where our headquarters are, I would have 500 competitors in solar and probably 2 or 3 in hydrogen. So we think that this is more attractive for us. We can build a competitive advantage in the green molecules easier than in the green electrons. And it's also our heritage. We've existed for almost 100 years, and we've always been in molecules as a company. So it also feels a bit closer to home. Now, how we go about it? There are many different ways you can get into hydrogen. We are lucky to find ourselves as the largest company in the south of Spain. So 15% of the GDP of Andalusia, which is the large province in the south, where everybody goes on holiday here, 15% of the GDP in Andalusia is our output. So we are a very, very substantial player in that region. We have a large industrial footprint, we have water access, we have a few thousand people working for us, all the contractors. So it's easy for us to build a new business in Andalusia. And Andalusia happens to be the place in Europe with the best sun conditions, very decent onshore wind conditions, and quite a lot of space. There's quite a lot of land. You wouldn't say so if you're in Marbella or Malaga trying to get a table, but there's a lot of land in the interior of Andalusia and in the provinces above it that you can use for large solar and wind farms with low unit cost. And that is the starting point of hydrogen, because although we talked about electrons and molecules being separate things in the energy system, hydrogen starts with electricity, with cheap renewable electricity, that you use, and everybody here who's paid any attention in their chemicals classes in high school will have done electrolysis. It's one of the things that is you do in your first year of chemistry in high school, and it's a very simple process where you run electricity through water and you separate it into hydrogen and oxygen. So it starts with cheap electricity, cheap renewable electricity, and the cheapest renewable electricity in Spain is in Andalusia, where we are the largest industrial company. So almost by luck, we find ourselves in the best place in Europe to produce green hydrogen. Now, many people, and we see this in this region as well, see the production of green hydrogen as a almost kind of a separate venture. We'll build a big solar park, we'll build an electrolyzer next to it, and we're going to produce hydrogen. The problem with that concept is, as we all know, the sun shines, if we're lucky, 12 hours a day, sometimes a bit less. And that means that the rest of the day, your electrolyzer is not working. And in the first 2 hours of the day, it's only working part-time, and the last 2 hours, it's only working part-time. So you get maybe 2,000 hours of usage out of your electrolyzer in that type of scheme. And that's quite a common scheme in the Middle East, because you have such good sun here. What we are able to achieve in Andalusia, with the help of the sun, the wind, but also the help of biomethane and also the help of our electric parks, we are able to produce essentially a constant 24/7 stream of hydrogen. If the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, then we will use biomethane, and our refineries produce green hydrogen as well. So we get very high usage out of these assets, and that puts our unit costs at a very, very, very different level than let's say others. So our way into this is we don't quite know what the future is going to hold, what the commercial models for hydrogen, etc., are going to be by 2035. But we know that if we're the lowest cost producer in a market that's growing so quickly, we're likely to be in the money with that production. And that really sort of focus is on being a low-cost, large-scale producer of hydrogen in the south of Spain. Now, the tricky piece is there's only so much hydrogen demand in the south of Spain. It's actually 40% of the Spanish hydrogen demand is in the south of Spain, so we have local customers, but our ambitions to produce are much bigger than that. So we need to construct export value chains, and they're eventually going to go through pipeline to the north of Europe. But until we're there, we're going to transform the hydrogen into methanol and ammonia, put it on ships, and bring it to the markets of Northern Europe and other parts of the world that will be buyers. So we're having to be quite creative about creating export routes while pipelines are still being constructed.
Yeah. And it dawned on me as we spent time on the CEPSA project with the interconnected nature of these pieces. And I think before we move on to the commercialization piece there, I'd like you to expand a little bit on the bios side of the positive motion strategy, and maybe touch upon the EV charging as well, because I think all of these pillars are an important part of how, as you said, CEPSA's competitive advantages can take the opportunity.
Yeah, it's so. If we start with the bio side, so second generation biofuels, as we said, why is it so important? It is because, as said, it's drop-in. You can use it. We have planes flying on sustainable aviation fuel today. There was even a flight on 100% sustainable aviation fuel last week, but they fly on 5, 10, 20%. And you use the same engines, the same planes, etc. So it's a very, very user-friendly, low-carbon alternative. But as we said, it's feedstock constrained. Eventually, there's only so much waste you can gather, and so the competitive advantage here comes from having access to feedstock and from having access to low-cost hydrogen, because sustainable aviation fuel is basically created by hydrogenizing the carbon molecules that you get out of the bio. And so you need a lot of hydrogen and you need a lot of feedstock. Now, we already discussed we have the cheapest hydrogen in Europe. And so if we get advantage feedstock in, then we're really well placed. So on bio, we're partnering with an Asian company called Apical, who have access to a large amount of waste streams, used cooking oil, palm oil residue, animal fats, other residues that we transport from Asia to Spain that give us a really competitive feedstock position. Then we use our cheap hydrogen, and then we use the relatively competitive labor cost of the south of Spain, certainly compared to the rest of Europe, to produce what we believe will be the most competitive sustainable aviation fuel in Europe. And then some of our competitors stop there. But the advantage we have, we've been in the aviation market for 100 years. We serve all the big airlines in the world, including Emirates and Etihad on a sunny day, and Iberia, British Airways, etc. So we actually have the logistics all the way down to the customer. Many biofuels companies sit there with their sustainable aviation fuel, but they can't get into the airport. We actually have our logistics go right into the plane. So we can commercialize that stuff. We do not only produce it, but also commercialize it ourselves, which protects us against, where does the margin sit in the chain? Will it sit particularly on the feedstock or particularly at the customer end? We are agnostic because we are totally integrated. So we believe we will be profitable in that business no matter where the margin sits. You mentioned EV charging. We have a network of 2,000 retail stations, most of them in Spain and Portugal, although we also have a presence in Morocco and Mexico. That, of course, is a very good business today, selling diesel, gasoline, etc. But with the fast penetration that EV is having in the world, and particularly in Europe, where you will only be able to buy an EV in 2035, and it's already driving a lot of consumer choice. That business is rapidly moving away from fossil fuel into charging. So clearly we need to offer a premium charging service to our customers, which is fast charging, 150 kilowatt hours, 350 kilowatt hours. So you don't spend more than 15 minutes in the CEPSA station waiting for your car to go from 0 to 80 in its charge. But it opens up a parallel opportunity. We say, if people are going to be my guest for 20 minutes, I don't want them to be doing email in the car. I want them to get into the station, buy a coffee, buy a sandwich, create a convenience experience that they want to come back to, and that they are willing that I get a higher share of wallet of that customer than if the only thing they do is quickly fill up their car and run away again. So essentially, between bio, fast charging, and the all hydrogen piece, we have three pillars, customer-facing pillars of our energy transition strategy. And the fourth, of course, is that charity starts back at home. So decarbonizing our own installations, investing in energy efficiency, investing in the electrification, bringing down the carbon footprint of what we do ourselves. If you work with CEPSA, you're not flying in Spain, you're only taking the train. And so bringing down the carbon footprint of what we do ourselves is, of course, if we don't lead by example, how can we ask other people to buy our low carbon solution? So that's very much a fourth element.
That's good. You touched on customers a little bit earlier for hydrogen, how it's a new market, and part of, I think, the real heart of today's discussion is how do you create that industry? And so I think it would be great for you to talk us through the kind of conversations you're having with customers. Where is the demand coming from? What do they want out of this equation you're trying to solve in terms of the value for them, the value for you in producing the hydrogen?
Absolutely. And we do see a lot of customers that are very keen to switch, but they don't know quite how, and they're worried about the price points, and they're worried about availability of products, etc. So let's talk a bit about all of them. First of all, it's useful to think of the different markets. One market, the most obvious market, is the current market for hydrogen. There's quite a lot of people using what we call grey hydrogen at the moment, which is hydrogen produced from natural gas. They tend to be industrial companies like refineries and chemical plants, but also fertilizer plants and others. And one issue with them, with these users in general, is they have relatively low affordability. These are very competitive industries, and so they can't really easily pay a big premium for green hydrogen voluntarily. But what is interesting in Europe today is if natural gas is at 40, and I think it was at 48 when I left the office last week, and if the carbon price is at 100, and I think it's at 85 at the moment, so these are pretty natural conditions at the moment, the grey hydrogen already is almost $4 a kilo. That's when, you know, cheaply made hydrogen in Europe starts to get into the range. So we can even, you know, if we go a bit further down the cost curve, and if the CO2 price in Europe goes up a bit further, we can actually compete straight with grey hydrogen in the market. So that's one very obvious customer group, is people already using hydrogen for their industrial applications. Then there is a whole fertilizer industry. And the fertilizer industry, as you know, uses ammonia as a base product, and ammonia is made of hydrogen and nitrogen. And the fertilizer industry and the food industry has also a big decarbonization challenge. So we believe that green ammonia, made from green hydrogen, will be an absolutely premium product in that market in the future. And so we are going to convert about half of our green hydrogen to green ammonia to feed the fertilizer industry and help it decarbonize its usage. And to the extent that they can charge that on to customers for fertilizers, for food, then you're finding a higher affordability market. Then there's the shipping market. And the shipping market, interestingly, would like to probably use biofuels because it's easier, you know, biodiesel. But we believe biofuels are going to mostly go to aviation, because aviation has better affordability, people has higher margins, and so the shipping industry, if it decarbonizes, and it will, and the IMO and the European Union are already putting decarbonization targets and targets around lowering CO2 footprint of shipping in front of them, they will need to shift to alternative shipping fuels. And if you accept that they can't really use biodiesel in a big way, and I think that is commonly accepted, it will go into, you know, cruise liners and other people but most ships will need a hydrogen-based solution, which will either be green methanol or green ammonia. And shipping companies are today discussing with us the price points for green methanol, for green ammonia, for them to be able to shift. And there are ships going today on green methanol. Next year you'll be able to order ships going on green ammonia. And we believe the shipping industry is going to move quite rapidly to adopt one of these two solutions, and we'll be producing both. We'll produce green methanol in Huelva. We made a big announcement last week Friday here in Dubai in a partnership with Maersk, and we're producing green ammonia in Algeciras, where our main partner is Yara, the world's largest fertilizer company. So we're creating partnerships with big customers to also give credibility to, and they are investing in these projects as well. They'll be investing partners, which I think gives credibility and peace of mind to the market. Now then there are other applications. We talk to utilities who have coal plants who can mix up to 20% green ammonia with their coal in order to decarbonize their output. But there are even now, we're talking, RWE are also here, Marcus Krebber, in Dubai today, are constructing a power plant that can use both natural gas and green ammonia as its fuel source, and where the turbines can consume both. So increasingly we're seeing use cases. Heavy trucking is one of them. You can go to Toyota or to Hyundai and buy a heavy truck that operates on hydrogen today. There are challenges around the distribution of that hydrogen to customers, etc. But those challenges will be resolved because the European Union and other geographies as well want to decarbonize heavy trucking, and there really isn't an electrification option if your heavy truck is going to travel any long distance. So again, hydrogen will be a really useful input there. Now I wanted to mention price point for a moment, because people are worried about price. I'd say two things about them. One thing is there still is a cost curve to come. At the moment, electrolyzers are expensive, and as we start to build 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 gigawatts of hydrogen in Europe, electrolyzers will come down, and that will that will take the unit cost of hydrogen down further. We also believe that solar and wind price points are going to come down as well, although in the last 12, 18 months we've seen them jump up a little bit with all the inflation, but there's still a cost curve to be had. So we do believe that green hydrogen and its derivatives, green ammonia and green methanol, will gain in competitiveness. At the same time, particularly in Europe, we see the CO2 price now at 80, but we believe it will be into triple digits, 100, 150, as we go to 2030, because that's what Repower EU needs in order to work out. So the fossil alternatives will grow in price. And then there's one important and not so often discussed point about price point, which I think is really important. Industry doesn't only want low prices, it also really benefits from having stable prices. And in the fossil world, that's never been on offer. You can buy hedges, etc., for maybe a year, maybe 18 months. But one of the big issues that industry has is this volatility. Oil at 40, oil at 80, oil at 140, gas at 20, 40, 150, 200. And the interesting thing about hydrogen and hydrogen-based alternatives, they are based, as we discussed, on renewable electricity. I am going to buy that renewable electricity on 15-year flat price PPA. And then I use that renewable electricity to make my green hydrogen. And so if an industrial customer wants to come to me and say, I would like to have a fixed price hydrogen deal for you for the next 15 years, can you give me absolute certainty of the price that I'm going to pay for my energy? I say, yes, I can. Because the whole chain is based on fixed price renewable PPAs. So the interesting piece, what you can't do on fossil fuels is give customers total visibility of their energy costs for the next 10, 15 years. You can do with hydrogen, ammonia and methanol. And even if you say, well, that is going to be a little bit more expensive than diesel today or natural gas today, they will trade that for certainty, because the volatility has been very, very damaging to industrial players. And I think that will be a large source of competitive advantage from industrial buyers and from other buyers if they actually know that the input is now fixed.
And this is such an important point. With COVID, with the energy crisis in Europe that led to the cost of living crisis, I think people now understand the volatility is very, very painful for households as well as businesses and the whole economy. So I think this is a really salient point and maybe doesn't get quite enough as attention as it should.
No, I don't think that's well enough understood, that you can actually create very, very stable energy prices for industry, but also for consumers as a result. And then, of course, you mentioned the Ukraine conflict. And apart from price volatility and very, very high energy costs that compelled European governments to subsidize fossil fuels to the tune of 500 billion euros, we can put a number here, but that's more than they've ever spent on subsidizing green energy. So was this an interesting moment in time to see how strong the energy transition convictions are in Europe. But that not only was an issue around price volatility and cost of living, but also very much about energy security. And I think it's one of the really interesting things about a hydrogen economy is that your energy security looks very different in that world. Europe can produce quite a lot of hydrogen itself, and the diversity of places that it can import green hydrogen from, or green ammonia or green methanol, is very different than in a fossil fuel world. North Africa, even West Africa become suddenly potentially very important suppliers of hydrogen in that world. So energy security also really, the political map of energy changes as a result of going from a fossil world to a hydrogen world. Of course, take decades, right? I mean, fossil fuel is going to be relevant, very relevant and important for a long time to come. But the hydrogen economy will start to change that map. And certainly for Spain, for Southern Europe, it gives the prospect of energy autonomy, even becoming an energy exporter. And for a country that's imported energy during all the industrial, from the start of the Industrial Revolution to today, that is quite a big deal, not just in terms of political relevance, but just in balance of payment. If you can stop importing energy and start exporting it, that's a huge deal. So there's an interesting element around balance of power in Europe as a result. Not only because you export energy, but eventually it's important to realize the reason why industry in Europe is predominantly in the north. Let's say if we just simplify it for a moment, Germany, Netherlands and the north of France, very, very heavy on industry, Belgium to some extent as well. The reason is cheap energy. Germany had cheap coal and cheap gas from Russia, and the Netherlands had its own natural gas field in Groningen and had therefore cheap natural gas. That's why European energy is predominantly based in the north of Europe. But if the energy source of the future, if green hydrogen is cheapest in Spain and Portugal, then in the beginning you will bring the energy to the industry. But over the years, you're likely to bring the industry to the energy. And so anybody who's going to build a new a new industrial plant in Europe is more likely to build it where the energy is cheapest in the future than where it's been in the past. And so there's an interesting, not just a balance of payment opportunity for Spain and Portugal, and to some extent also for Italy, Greece, etc. Although the ability to really ramp up renewables is a bit more difficult there because of geography. Ideally you need large, flat piece of land, and anybody who's been to Greece knows it's anything but flat. But they have the same opportunity as well. Will really change the balance of power in Europe over the coming decades. Now, climate change might push it the other way, so we can have a long discussion about where Europe is going. But the opportunity is not just industrial. I think there's a big political opportunity in there as well.
Yeah. I think this point on energy security couldn't be higher on the agenda. I think for the European governments, and with that, it kind of leads to the next question around the relationship between business and governments when it comes to facilitating and enabling this industry. What's your experience so far, and what do you think needs to happen going forward?
So, my experience so far is that in general, this is quite a popular agenda. People want to join the photo opportunity. You do a hydrogen announcement, and you need to do crowd control because everybody likes to be in the picture. Or you do a biofuels announcement, and similarly. So, at the abstract level, you get almost endless support from the European Union or from the Spanish government, and everybody's but that's exactly what we need. I think one of the biggest risks to energy transition is not the popular support of the concept, is actually in the much more mundane world of permitting. It's underestimated, but it's important. And because if you think through what it will need, and I give a lot of European examples because that's where we're based, but they're true in many places. Going from 20 to 50% electrification in Europe sounds like almost, okay, well, let's do a few percent a year and we'll get there. But the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built to go from 20 to 50 is enormous in terms of high voltage power lines that you need to move all that electricity from where it's being used to where it's being consumed. If you think of all the cars in London or in Paris or Madrid needing to be charged, the inner city electrical grid can't support it. That's an enormous amount of electricity that has to be brought into the city and into charge points. So the infrastructure challenge just on the electrification side is enormous. Then we are going to produce a lot of hydrogen in the south of Spain, but it needs to get to the Ruhrgebiet in Germany. So you need to build a hydrogen pipeline from the south of Spain to the north of Germany. And you probably go through 600 cities and villages that need to permit that hydrogen pipeline with people who don't want the hydrogen pipeline through their garden. And if you think of the permitting challenge, it's actually phenomenal. In the early 2000s, Germany went very big down the solar and wind path, as everybody will remember. And the idea was they're going to build solar in the south, because there's a lot of sun, and wind in the north, because there's a lot of wind. And then they were going to connect it with high voltage power lines so the country would have renewable energy all day. It all worked out except for the high voltage power lines. In the last 20 years, the government of Germany has not been able to permit. They're the government, but they can't permit it. because there are so many ways that the citizens and the villages and the states can oppose the construction of high voltage power lines, can ask for an additional environmental impact assessment. 20 years down the line, these lines still don't exist. And so we're talking about taking electrification from 20 to 50%. If we're talking about building hydrogen pipelines, if we talk about a very Spanish experience, it takes me 18 months to permit a high 150 kilowatt hour electric vehicle charger. So from the time they say, I would like to put 3 of them here in this station, it takes me 18 months to get the permit and then 2 weeks to build it. In China, that whole cycle is 4 weeks. So permitting in general of all the infrastructure required to build this new economy is a much bigger risk than political support at the kind of more photo opportunity level. And it very often goes down to citizen protected rights by constitution. And so you say, okay, well, let's override all that and build it. But then, you do need community support for the energy transition. And that equation is unresolved. And we have hardly any time to resolve it. So I think, it's a long answer to your question. Our relationship with the authority is very positive. But the existing processes to build infrastructure and to get permits for stuff are all designed for very incremental change. A continent that's kind of almost finished and we're tweaking it. But this continent needs to be reinvented. And these processes, if we continue to apply them, we will lose the energy transition race. And it's true in many places in the world. The US will be a perfect example as well. If anybody here has ever tried to build a power connection between 2 American states, it almost can't be done. And a lot of that will need to be done in the energy transition. So I think there's not later today CEPSA is one of the participants and sponsors of the Planning for Climate Commission that is presenting a big report to the UN today. I'm honored to be on the board of it, and we're presenting the findings today. And it's scary. That is probably the biggest. It's not money, it's not technology. Permitting is the biggest risk.
I think two things I would like to just highlight in what you said, because again, they don't get enough attention. It's the price stability in the first answer there, and this permitting. I mean, as you said, it's a very, very difficult problem. How do you make it work for the communities as well? It's a tricky problem that not just Europe, but there's many countries in the world struggling with that issue as well. If I can take us to some of the partnerships that specifically CEPSA has done. We talked about the commercialization of hydrogen. I know you've got this north-south corridor. I think that's an important point just to touch on for us, how partnerships are helping mobilize speed and scale in this industry.
Yeah. No, if you're essentially building a new business, then you can only do it through partnerships, partly because you're not capable of, you don't have the capability to do everything that's needed. But also, there are existing players in each part of the value chain that will benefit from this happening. So it goes all the way from the people that do the renewable power to the customers on the ammonia and the methanol side, to the people that have the feedstock on the bio side, to the municipalities and the provinces and the government. But also, indeed, you go to, for example, on the ammonia side, there's not so much ammonia demand in Spain, and we're going to produce a lot of it. So we're actually partnering with the Port of Rotterdam and with a number of players there to already start to build infrastructure to receive our ammonia, distribute it, but also crack it back into hydrogen and use it in the market there. And if you line up all the partners that you need in order to be able to take a big investment decision like that, and everybody, we haven't even talked about financing yet. Everybody has to say yes on the same date. The complexity is a bit like a moon landing. There's so many moving parts, because it's not just do you want to work with me, but you need to get the commercial terms right. You need to get the equipment suppliers to supply something they haven't done before, etc. So the complexity is enormous. But the only way you can get there, but therefore, is to get all these partners invested into the value chain. That kind of there's at least a certain alignment that everybody benefits from the whole thing working, and from it working start to end. In the traditional industry, oil and gas, you can just focus on one piece. You can say, I'm going to do the upstream, I'm going to do the refining piece or the transport or shipping. In a new industry like this, you have to be start to finish, to orchestrate it, to invest in it, and to be down the whole value chain, which is hugely interesting. But it also means it's harder to get it together. But once you're able to get it together, and I think that's one of the basically assumptions that we have and that our shareholders, Mubadala and Carlyle, have. Once you're able to get it together and you can repeat, you can scale, then you're quite distinct. And then you have a first mover advantage and a competitive advantage, because now you know how to do it. Now you have existing partnerships that can scale up. And for anybody else that says, I want to do the same, say, well, welcome. Go and learn how to do it. And go and get some industrial land in the south of Spain, by the way, which takes you 15 years anyway. So we'll see you in 2040. So we do believe that there's a business-wise, from a returns perspective, there's a huge competitive advantage in cracking the code. Because cracking the code is not something you can patent. It is actually a capability, and it's relationships and capabilities, and they're much harder to copy than technology. So once we have relationships, capabilities, and we've cracked that code, we believe we will be in a prime position to not just be the first ones, but also to become the largest ones.
And building on that, it's probably my final question for you is around the differentiation you feel like you have at CEPSA and being able to go after these opportunities, build that capability versus some of your peers. Right? You have private ownership and no pressure being on the Mubadala Pavilion and answering this one, but like what benefits that gives you versus the peer group?
Yeah, I'd say that there are a number of elements that give us fundamental advantage. One we talked about is actually being in the south of Spain and having such a strong, my lawyer wouldn't allow me to say dominant, but at least very strong position is a real advantage. Second, being an existing industrial player in energy is a big advantage. We have very, very strong engineering talent. We know how to run plants. We run chemical plants, we run refineries. So we have an existing. If you're a startup, it's really hard to imagine that you can actually successfully run the technical side of this. And we have thousands of really capable operators, engineers, etc., and a lot of experience in that space, together with the position in the south of Spain. And then indeed, as you say, the ownership structure. I've worked in Shell, a publicly quoted energy company, for a long time. And it has millions of owners. And they all have their separate opinion on what the company should do. And it has a board with very diverse group of people on it who also have their own interests and reputations to worry about. And so radical decision making in that environment is very hard. If you have two owners who are aligned with your strategy, who want to go as fast as possible into this green molecule future, then the speed at which you can move is almost endless. I have an app group on my phone with my chairman from Mubadala and my vice chairman from Carlyle. And if the three of us think something is a good idea, we do it. Which is a really different speed at which you can operate. And in the energy transition, being able to take decisions that are fast and that are bold and that you can stick with a strategy almost no matter what happens is a huge advantage. So I do believe we have the near perfect setup in order to succeed in this. We still need to do the work. But I think the team that's here and the team that's in Madrid is hugely enthused about doing it and feels 100% support of the shareholders, of which Mubadala is obviously the largest one, and we're very happy with that setup.
And that's great because Mubadala is very committed to this. We are very, very excited and willing to support you, and thank you to you and the management team. I know some of them are here today working very hard on making this real, and it's not an easy thing to do. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Maarten, for sharing your views.
Thanks, Rob.